The coffee tastes like disappointment and bad decisions, which makes it perfect for 3 in the morning. I've been nursing the same cup for 2 hours, watching the rain draw crooked lines down my office window. The neon sign across the street flickers, 24-hour bail bonds, casting everything in sickly pink intervals. My desk lamp pools yellow light over a stack of unpaid bills and a case file I should have closed a week ago. The radiator hisses like an angry cat, and somewhere in the building a pipe drips with the persistence of Chinese water torture. This is what semi-retirement looks like. A cramped office above a Chinese restaurant, the smell of yesterday's lo mein seeping through the floorboards, and enough bourbon in my desk drawer to pickle a small elephant. I should be home, but home is 4 walls and too many memories. At least here, the ghosts keep their distance. The phone rings. I stare at it like it's a snake coiled on my desk. Nothing good ever comes from a call at this hour. Bill collectors have better sense, and the kind of clients who find me don't usually work bankers' hours. The ringing persists, shrill and demanding. I consider letting it go, but curiosity killed more than just cats. It also pays the rent. Marshall! My voice comes out rougher than sandpaper. Ray? Ray, is that you? The voice hits me like a sucker punch. I haven't heard it in 5 years, not since Ellen's funeral. Julia Wells. Ellen's baby sister, the one who always looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. The one who blamed me for not being there when Ellen needed me most. Julia. I lean back in my chair, which creaks in protest. It's late. Or early, depending on your perspective. I'm sorry, I know. I didn't know who else to call. Her voice trembles, high and thin, like a wire about to snap. It's Sophie. My daughter. Something's wrong with her, Ray. Really wrong. I rub my eyes with my free hand. Family drama. It's always family drama, and it's never as complicated as people make it out to be. Define wrong. We talking about grades? Boys? The usual teenage rebellion? She's 7. That stops me cold. 7. The same age as, but I don't go there. Not at 3 in the morning. Not with Julia Wells on the phone. Not ever if I can help it. Okay, 7. What's she doing? Acting out? Nightmares? She draws pictures. Julia's breathing sounds labored, like she's been running. All the time. Obsessively. Pictures of things that haven't happened yet. I take a sip of cold coffee and immediately regret it. Julia, kids draw. It's what they do. Doesn't mean... She drew the Patterson fire 3 days before it happened. Every detail, Ray. The truck that hit the hydrant, the family dog trapped on the 2nd floor, everything. The Patterson fire made the front page of the Tribune last week. Electrical short, they said. Whole family got out, but it was close. Coincidence. Kids see more than we think. Maybe she overheard something. Adult conversation. She drew my death. The words hang in the air like smoke. Outside, the rain picks up, drumming harder against the glass. The neon sign flickers faster, painting the walls in urgent pink pulses. Julia, she got the date right. Her voice cracks. My cancer diagnosis. The doctor called it remission, but Sophie drew me in a hospital bed with tubes and machines. She wrote the date underneath in her careful little handwriting. March 15th. That's when they told me it came back. That's when they told me I had 6 months. My hand tightens around the phone. The uncomfortable heat starts in my chest, spreading outward like spilled whiskey. I recognize the feeling, guilt, sharp and familiar. Ellen used to get that tone when she was scared, when the world felt too big and uncertain. I'd failed her then. I'd been chasing leads and following hunches while she needed me at home. When did Sophie draw this picture? 2 weeks ago, before I even felt sick. I close my eyes and see Ellen in her yellow sundress, the one with tiny flowers that she wore to the county fair. She'd wanted to ride the Ferris wheel, but I'd been on a case, always on a case. Said we'd go next year. There wasn't a next year. Ray, are you still there? I'm here. I open my eyes, focus on the rain patterns on the window. Each drop traces its own path down, never following the same route twice. This kid, Sophie, she's adopted? Yes. I've had her for 2 years. She's been through hell, bounced between foster homes. I thought I could give her stability. When did the drawings start? Right after she recovered from the flu. High fever, hallucinations. When it broke, she started drawing these things. Tomorrow's newspaper headlines. Car accidents that happen the next day. A closed casket at a funeral she's never been to. I lean forward, elbows on the desk. The case file slides to one side, revealing a water stain shaped like a question mark. Julia, I investigate cheating spouses and insurance fraud. What you're describing sounds like you need a psychiatrist, not a private detective. I tried that. 3 of them. They all say the same thing. Childhood trauma, acting out for attention. But Ray, the things she draws, they happen. Every single one. The radiator gives a particularly violent hiss, and I jump. My nerves are shot, have been for years. Too many cases that went sideways, too many people I couldn't save. But something in Julia's voice, something in the desperate way she's trying to convince me, reminds me why I used to be good at this job. Before the scandal, before I lost everything that mattered. Where are you living these days? Maple Street. The blue house with the white shutters, you remember? Ellen and I used to play in the backyard when we were kids. I remember. I remember Ellen pointing it out during one of our drives, talking about childhood summers and scraped knees. I remember thinking I'd never need to know where it was. Ray, please. I know things between us haven't been good since Ellen died. But I'm scared. Really scared. And Sophie, she asks about you sometimes. Ellen must have mentioned you to her before. Before Ellen died. Before I failed to be there when it mattered most. The heat in my chest spreads to my throat, makes it hard to swallow. I look at the stack of bills, at the empty bourbon bottle in the trash, at the photograph of Ellen I keep face down in my desk drawer. Outside, the city sleeps fitfully under its blanket of rain and neon. Somewhere out there, a 7-year-old girl draws pictures of tomorrow's tragedies. I'll be there in the morning, I hear myself say. Julia's exhale sounds like a prayer. Thank you, Ray. Thank you. After she hangs up, I sit in the dark for a long time, listening to the rain and the hiss of the radiator. My hands are steady, but there's that warmth in my chest again, that uncomfortable heat I recognize as guilt. Or maybe hope. At this hour, they feel like the same thing. The blue house with white shutters looks exactly like every other house on Maple Street, which is to say, it looks like the American dream wrapped in vinyl siding and good intentions. Julia's Honda sits in the driveway, one tire low, the back bumper held on with duct tape and stubborn optimism. I park behind it and sit for a moment, watching morning light filter through the maple trees that give the street its name. Through the front window, I can see the aftermath of childhood. Toys scattered like shrapnel from some cheerful explosion, colored pencils rolling across surfaces, drawings taped to every available wall. It's the kind of organized chaos that speaks of a woman trying her best with limited resources and unlimited love. Julia opens the door before I knock. She looks older than I remember, thinner, with that hollow-eyed exhaustion that comes from sleeping in shifts and worrying in circles. Her dark hair is pulled back in a ponytail that's already coming loose at 8:30 in the morning. Ray, thank you for coming. She steps aside, and I catch the smell of coffee and crayons, breakfast dishes, and something else, fear, sharp and metallic. Where is she? Kitchen table. She's been up since dawn, drawing. Julia's hands flutter around her sweater, smoothing wrinkles that aren't there. She does that now. Wakes up like someone called her name. The living room looks like a toy store exploded in slow motion. Coloring books lie open on the coffee table, their pages bleeding rainbows onto the white surface. Picture books lean against couch cushions like drunken soldiers. But it's the drawings that catch my attention. Dozens of them, taped to the walls with the careful precision of a gallery curator. Crayon and marker sketches of houses, trees, people. Normal kid stuff, except for the ones that aren't. A car wrapped around a telephone pole, smoke rising in black spirals. A man in a suit falling downstairs, his briefcase spilling papers like confetti. A dog lying still beside a busy road. Each drawing is dated in careful block letters, and each date is from the past week. Jesus, Julia, I know. I stopped taking them down after the third one came true. Sophie sits at the kitchen table like a small pale statue. Her brown hair hangs in tangles around her face, and her hands are stained with ink and charcoal. She doesn't look up when we enter, just keeps drawing with the focused intensity of a surgeon performing heart surgery. The paper in front of her shows a car, a dark sedan with chrome bumpers and wire wheels. My car, or one damn close to it. In her drawing, the sedan sits crumpled against a brick wall, steam rising from its hood. A figure lies sprawled on the asphalt nearby, arms at unnatural angles. The license plate is clearly visible, DMR 471. My license plate. Sophie? My voice comes out steady, which surprises me. That's quite a picture. She doesn't look up, just adds another detail, a crack in the windshield that spiderwebs across the glass. It already happened. Long time ago. You were chasing someone who hurt children. The room tilts slightly. That accident was 15 years ago, a high-speed pursuit that ended with me in the hospital, and a child molester wrapped around a maple tree. I never talked about it, not to Ellen, not to anyone. The official report was buried deep enough to require a mining permit. How do you know about that? I can see the scars when I draw you. Sophie's voice is matter-of-fact, like she's discussing the weather. They hurt, but they made you careful. That's good. Careful people save more children. Julia sits down hard in the chair beside me. Her face has gone the color of skim milk. She does this, knows things she shouldn't know. I lean forward, trying to catch Sophie's eyes, but she keeps her gaze fixed on the paper. Her hands move with mechanical precision, adding shadows and details to a scene I lived through in screaming metal and broken glass. Sophie, can you look at me? You won't like what's in the basement. She finally glances up, and her eyes are too old for her face, too knowing. They're the color of storm clouds, gray and deep and full of rain. Nobody ever likes what's in the basement. What basement? Every basement. Your basement. The basement where they keep the children who see too much. A chill walks up my spine with steel-toed boots. What children? But Sophie has gone back to her drawing, adding details to the wreckage that make my chest tight. She knows about the blood on the steering wheel, about the way the radio kept playing even after everything went quiet. Julia stands abruptly, smoothing her sweater again. That's when I notice it, a small blue flower pinned to her collar. Artificial, silk petals the color of deep water, innocuous except for the way it catches the morning light. Something about it nags at me, like a word on the tip of my tongue or a face half remembered from a dream. Julia, that flower, where did you get it? Her hand flies to her collar, touching the bloom like she'd forgotten it was there. This? A man gave it to me yesterday, outside Sophie's school. He said it was for being such a dedicated mother. What man? A doctor, I think. Very professional, well-dressed. He knew Sophie's name, knew about her drawings, said he worked with special children. The coffee in my stomach turns to acid. Did he give you his name? Glaze, I think. Dr. Glaze. He was very kind, very understanding. He wants to help Sophie with her abilities. Sophie's crayon stops moving. She looks up at me with those storm cloud eyes, and when she speaks, her voice is barely above a whisper. The man with the blue flower makes the future happen. He collects children like me. We draw what he wants us to draw. Sophie, he's coming back today. He thinks I don't know, but I drew it this morning. She pulls another paper from beneath her current drawing. This one shows a man in a dark suit standing in a school hallway, talking to a woman with severe features. In the background, a small figure with tangled hair watches from a doorway. "He makes the future happen," Sophie repeats, and goes back to her drawing of my wrecked car. "But sometimes the future fights back." I look at Julia, at the blue flower pinned to her sweater like a target, at the drawings covering every surface of this house. Outside, Maple Street continues its pretense of normalcy. Lawn mowers humming, dogs barking, children playing games that don't predict tomorrow's tragedies. But in this kitchen, with this pale child drawing scenes from my buried past, normal has packed its bags and left town. What remains is the uncomfortable heat in my chest, the kind that comes from recognizing danger dressed up as kindness, the kind that comes from knowing I'm already too late to walk away. The morning fog clings to Maple Street like a guilty conscience, turning familiar shapes into questionable shadows. Sophie walks beside me with the mechanical gait of someone sleepwalking through daylight, a sketch pad clutched against her chest and a fistful of colored pencils in her free hand. She draws while walking, never looking up from the paper, navigating potholes and cracks in the sidewalk with the unconscious skill of someone who's learned to live in two worlds at once. The neighborhood has that muffled quality that fog brings, as if someone's thrown a blanket over the whole street. Dogs bark behind fences we can't see. A lawn mower starts and stops in stuttering intervals. But there's something else in the quiet, something that makes the hair on my neck stand at attention. It's the feeling of being watched by eyes you can't locate. "You don't have to walk me," Sophie says without looking up from her drawing. Julia usually just watches from the porch. Julia's not feeling well today. I keep my voice casual, but my eyes sweep the empty porches and darkened windows. "Besides, I wanted to see your school." "It's just a school. Brick and windows and teachers who smell like coffee and worry." Her pencil moves in quick, sure strokes. "But today's different." "How different?" She doesn't answer, just keeps drawing. The paper shows the outline of a rectangular box, dark and polished. As we walk, she adds details: brass handles, flowers arranged on top, a small brass nameplate, a coffin, closed, dignified, surrounded by the kind of elaborate floral arrangements that cost more than most people make in a week. At the bottom of the page, in her careful block letters, she writes today's date. "Sophie." I stop walking. "Whose funeral is that?" "I don't know yet. Sometimes the names come later, sometimes they don't come at all." She looks up at me with those storm cloud eyes. "But it's today, always today when I draw the date." A car door slams somewhere in the fog, followed by footsteps on wet pavement. Sophie's pencil pauses mid-stroke, and she tilts her head like a dog hearing a whistle only she can detect. "He's here already. I thought we'd have more time." "Who's here?" But she's walking again, faster now, the sketch pad pressed tight against her chest. I lengthen my stride to keep up, my eyes searching the fog for movement, for the source of those footsteps we heard. St. Augustine Elementary School emerges from the mist like a ship from gray water. It's one of those solid brick buildings from the 1950s, built when schools were fortresses against ignorance and communities still believed in the future. American flag hanging limp in the still air, yellow buses lined up like sleeping beasts, children's voices echoing from the playground behind the building. Normal. Aggressively, determinedly normal. Sophie stops at the edge of the school property, her free hand finding mine. Her fingers are small and cold, stained with ink and charcoal dust. "Do you see him?" I scan the area. Parents dropping off kids, a crossing guard in a bright orange vest, teachers with coffee cups and tired smiles heading for the front entrance. Then I see him. He stands near the main entrance talking to a tall, severe-looking woman in a navy blue suit. The woman has the bearing of someone in charge. Principal, probably, or assistant superintendent. She nods at whatever he's saying, her expression politely attentive. The man himself looks like he stepped out of a boardroom catalog. Perfectly tailored dark suit, silver hair combed with mathematical precision, posture that suggests military training softened by years of conference rooms and expense account lunches. He's holding a manila folder, gesturing with it as he speaks, and pinned to his lapel is a blue flower, identical to the one Julia wore yesterday. "That's him," Sophie whispers. "The man with the blue flower." I watch him hand the folder to the principal, watch her scan whatever's inside with growing interest. They shake hands with the formal courtesy of professionals conducting business. He turns slightly, and I get a better look at his face. Angular features, pale blue eyes that seem to catalog everything they see. When he smiles, it doesn't reach those eyes. "What's his business here?" "He collects children, special children, children who see things." Sophie's grip on my hand tightens. "He came to my old school, too, before Julia found me. Talked to the teachers about helping kids with unusual abilities." The man glances in our direction, and for a moment his pale gaze meets mine across the playground. He doesn't look surprised to see me. If anything, he looks pleased, like a chess player who's just watched his opponent make an expected move. He says something to the principal, who looks our way as well. She nods, writes something on a piece of paper, hands it to him. The transaction has the smooth efficiency of a practiced routine. "Sophie, has he ever talked to you directly?" "Once, last week. He said I had a gift, that he could help me understand it better. Said there were other children like me and that we could all learn together." Her voice drops to barely above a whisper. "He showed me pictures of the other children. They all looked sad." The man starts walking in our direction, his stride confident and unhurried. He has the bearing of someone accustomed to getting what he wants through patience and persistence rather than force. The kind of predator who wears a suit and speaks in soothing tones about helping. "Sophie, I want you to go straight to your classroom when the bell rings. Don't talk to him, don't listen to anything he says." "Can you do that?" She nods, but I can feel her trembling through our joined hands. "He makes the future happen, Mr. Marshall. The things I draw, the things all the special children draw. He uses them, makes them real. How? I don't know. But the sad children in the pictures, they don't draw happy things anymore. They only draw what he tells them to draw." The man is close enough now that I can see the details, the expensive watch, the silk tie, the way his shoes shine despite the wet pavement. His smile broadens as he approaches, and I notice his teeth are very white, very straight. "Excuse me," he calls out, his voice carrying the easy authority of someone used to being heard. "You must be Mr. Marshall. I'm Dr. Martin Glaze." He extends a hand, and I notice the blue flower on his lapel is fresher than the one Julia wore, its silk petals still crisp and unwrinkled. When he smiles, the expression never touches his pale eyes. "And this must be Sophie. We've heard so much about your remarkable abilities, dear." Sophie takes a step behind me, still clutching my hand. When she speaks, her voice is steady but small. "You make the future happen. You make the sad things real, Doctor." Glaze's smile doesn't waver, but something flickers behind those pale eyes. Interest, hunger, the look of a collector who's found something rare and valuable. "What an imagination," he says, but he's looking at me when he says it. "We really should talk, Mr. Marshall, about Sophie's future, about the opportunities available to children with her unique perspective." The school bell rings, cutting through the fog like a blade. Around us, children start moving toward the building, their voices bright and normal in the gray morning air. Sophie squeezes my hand once, hard, then lets go and walks toward the school entrance. She doesn't look back, but I can see the tension in her small shoulders, the way she clutches her sketch pad like armor. Dr. Glaze watches her go with the patient attention of a hawk studying a field mouse. "Remarkable child," he murmurs. "Quite remarkable indeed." The uncomfortable heat in my chest flares into something sharper, something that feels dangerously close to rage. I've seen that look before, in interview rooms and courthouses, on the faces of people who view children as objects to be used rather than souls to be protected. "Stay away from her," I say quietly. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me, Doctor." Glaze's smile finally reaches his eyes, but it's not the kind of expression that brings comfort. It's the smile of someone who's just confirmed a suspicion, someone who's pleased to discover that the game is more interesting than he'd initially thought. "Good day, Mr. Marshall," he says, and walks back toward the school building. I stand in the fog for a long time after he's gone, watching the yellow buses load up and rumble away, listening to the sounds of children settling into another day of learning to read and write and pretend the world makes sense. But in my pocket, my hands are shaking, and that uncomfortable heat has spread from my chest to my throat, hot and sharp as swallowed glass. Back in my office, the afternoon light filters through the grimy window like weak tea, casting everything in shades of amber and doubt. The Chinese restaurant below has started prep for the dinner rush, and the smell of garlic and ginger seeps through the floorboards, mixing with the lingering aroma of stale coffee and old regrets. I've cleared my desk of everything except my laptop, a legal pad, and the kind of focused determination I haven't felt in years. Dr. Martin Glaze. The name sits in my mind like a splinter, small but sharp enough to demand attention. I start with the basics. Medical licensing boards, professional associations, the kind of paper trail that legitimate doctors leave behind like breadcrumbs. What I find makes my coffee taste even more bitter than usual. Martin Glaze exists, all right. Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins residency, a string of publications in journals with names like Developmental Psychology Quarterly and Cognitive Science Review. On paper, he's exactly what he appears to be, a respected child psychologist with an impressive pedigree and a specialty in something called predictive cognitive development. It's the blue flower that opens the door I've been looking for. The image search takes me down a rabbit hole that gets darker with every click. Blue silk flowers, artificial blooms, purchased in bulk by an organization called the Cerberus Foundation. The Foundation's website is a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak, mission statements about nurturing exceptional children and advancing human potential, wrapped around photographs of smiling kids that look like they were lifted from stock photo catalogs. But dig deeper, past the glossy surface, and uglier shapes start to emerge. The first disappearance happened 3 years ago in Portland. Emma Chen, age 6, diagnosed with what her teachers called unusual pattern recognition abilities. She could predict which numbers would come up on lottery tickets, which horses would win at the track. Her parents thought it was cute until men in suits started showing up at their door, asking questions about Emma's gift. The family moved twice before Emma vanished from a playground in broad daylight. No witnesses, no evidence, no trace. Then Tommy Rodriguez in Phoenix, 9 years old, drew pictures of plane crashes 2 days before they happened. His foster parents found his room empty one morning, window open, no sign of struggle, like he'd simply walked into the night and dissolved. Sarah Kim in Detroit, Marcus Williams in New Orleans, Jennifer Walsh in Seattle, all children, all with abilities that defied explanation. All gone without a trace, leaving behind only worried families and case files that went nowhere fast. The pattern is so clear it might as well be spelled out in neon, but somehow the dots never got connected. Different cities, different jurisdictions, different excuses for why the investigation stalled out. Different blue flowers pressed between the pages of case files that should have been evidence. I lean back in my chair, which protests with its familiar creak. My hands are steady, but there's ice in my veins, the kind of cold that comes from recognizing something familiar and terrible. I've seen this before. Cases that disappear into bureaucratic black holes, evidence that vanishes, witnesses who suddenly develop amnesia. The kind of thing that happens when people with money and influence decide that certain inconvenient truths need to stay buried. Cerberus Foundation leads me to Cerberus Dynamics, a defense contractor with fingers in every pie that matters: Homeland Security, intelligence gathering, something called predictive analysis for national defense. The kind of company that doesn't advertise on television and doesn't return phone calls from private investigators in cramped offices above Chinese restaurants. But they do recruit children, special children. Children who see patterns others miss, who dream tomorrow's headlines, who draw pictures of things that haven't happened yet. The uncomfortable heat in my chest has spread to my throat, making it hard to swallow. I'm staring at something that shouldn't exist, a conspiracy so vast and so carefully hidden that it makes my old police corruption cases look like jaywalking tickets. These people don't just cover up crimes, they create them, shape them, use gifted children as some kind of psychic early warning system. And Dr. Martin Glaze, with his perfect smile and his blue flower lapel pin, is their recruiting sergeant. The knock on my door comes at exactly 4:30, 3 sharp raps that sound nothing like a potential client or a bill collector. I close the laptop, slide the legal pad into my desk drawer, and check the weight of the .38 in my shoulder holster. Old habits. It's open. No one enters. I wait 30 seconds, then check the hallway. Empty, but sitting on the threadbare carpet outside my door is a manila envelope, the kind you buy at any office supply store. No return address, no postmark. Hand-delivered by someone who didn't want to stick around for signatures. Inside the envelope is a single sheet of paper. Heavy stock, expensive. The kind children use when they want their art to last. The drawing shows a man lying in what looks like my office, arms splayed at unnatural angles, eyes staring at nothing. Blood pools beneath his head, dark red against the yellow floorboards. The desk lamp casts harsh shadows, and through the window, the neon sign from the bail bondsman flickers its familiar pink glow. At the bottom of the page, in careful block letters, Ray Marshall. Tomorrow. My hands shake as I turn the paper over. On the back, in the same childish handwriting, some futures can't be changed. Others can. Choose wisely. A friend. I set the drawing on my desk and stare at it until the details blur together. The man in the picture has my face, my clothes, my tired eyes and graying hair. Even the scar on my left temple from the car accident 15 years ago is rendered with careful accuracy. Sophie drew this. Or one of the other children, the ones Dr. Glaze has already collected. The ones who don't draw happy things anymore. The ice in my veins spreads outward, numbing my fingers, making my chest tight. This isn't a family drama about a troubled kid acting out for attention. This is something else entirely. Something that reaches into dark corners where children disappear and government contractors shape tomorrow's tragedies with the stroke of a crayon. I think about Sophie's pale face, her storm cloud eyes, the way she clutched my hand outside the school. I think about Julia, wearing her blue flower like a target, trusting a stranger with her daughter's future. I think about all the other children who drew pictures and vanished, leaving behind only worried families and case files that went nowhere. The drawing stares back at me from my desk, stark and detailed and dated for tomorrow. In it, I'm dead, sprawled across the same floorboards where I've paced through 100 sleepless nights, solved in the same office where I've nursed my failures and tried to forget my mistakes. But I'm not dead yet. And maybe, if I'm smart enough and fast enough and lucky enough, I won't be tomorrow either. I fold the drawing carefully and slip it into my jacket pocket next to my heart. Then I check my gun again, count the bullets, and start planning for a future that someone else has already drawn in red crayon and childhood terror. The game has changed. Hell, maybe there never was a game. Maybe there was only this: children who see too much, predators who use their gifts, and one tired old detective who's finally found a case worth dying for. The uncomfortable heat in my chest has crystallized into something harder, something that feels dangerously close to purpose. Tomorrow is coming whether I like it or not, but tonight I've got work to do. I wake up with my face pressed against the desk blotter, the taste of old coffee and older mistakes coating my tongue like rust. My coat hangs across my shoulders like a threadbare security blanket, and there's a crick in my neck that feels like someone tried to fold me in half and gave up halfway through. The radiator has given up its ghost sometime during the night, leaving the office cold enough to store meat. The drawing is still there, face up on the desk beside my cheek. My own death rendered in careful crayon strokes, dated for today. In the gray pre-dawn light filtering through the grimy window, the red blood looks black, and my drawn face stares at nothing with the vacant expression of all corpses everywhere. Sleep brought no relief, only fragments of dreams that felt more like warnings. Sophie's pale hands moving across paper, her storm cloud eyes reflecting scenes that shouldn't exist. In the dreams, her drawings came alive, crayon lines bleeding into reality, stick figures walking off pages to cast shadows in the real world. I watched children's faces melt and reform, watched futures written in primary colors spread like infection through a world that couldn't defend itself against tomorrow's tragedies. The phone rings, shrill and insistent, cutting through the last wisps of nightmare. The caller ID shows Julia's number, but when I check the time, it's not even 5:30. Nothing good ever comes from calls before sunrise, especially from women whose children draw pictures of death. "Marshall!" My voice comes out like gravel in a blender. "Ray, thank God." Julia's words tumble out in a rush, high and breathless. "Something's wrong." Really wrong this time. "Sophie hasn't said a word since you left yesterday. She just sits there, staring at that drawing she made." "The funeral one." I sit up and my spine pops like bubble wrap. "Has she eaten? Slept?" "I don't think so." I tried to move the drawing, thinking maybe if she couldn't see it, but she just drew another one. Identical. Then another. "She's got a whole stack of them now, Ray. The same funeral, over and over." Through the window, the city starts its daily resurrection. Streetlights flicker off in sequence, and early commuters emerge from subway stations like moths fleeing flame. The bail bondsman's neon sign has finally given up, leaving only the ghost of pink light against the brick wall across the street. "What about the date? Still today?" "Every single one. But Ray, there's something else." Julia's voice drops to barely above a whisper. She circled it. In red crayon. Not just wrote it, circled it like she was marking it on a calendar, like it's an appointment she can't miss. The ice in my veins spreads outward, numbing my fingers, making my chest tight. I've seen enough death to know its approach, the way it announces itself in small details and shifted atmospheres. The air tastes different when violence is coming, sharp and metallic like blood before it's spilled. "I'm coming over." "There's more." Julia's breathing sounds labored, like she's been running. "She's been asking for you." "Not talking, just pointing at the drawing and then at the door. Like she knows you need to be here." I stand, my joints protesting the movement, and catch sight of my reflection in the darkened window. I look exactly like the corpse in Sophie's drawing. Same tired eyes, same lines around the mouth, same scar on the left temple. The only difference is that I'm still breathing. For now. "Julia, listen to me. Don't let anyone in the house. I don't care if they're selling encyclopedias or saving souls. Nobody comes through that door until I get there." "Why?" "Ray, what's happening?" The question hangs in the air like smoke. What's happening is that I've stumbled into something that makes my old corruption cases look like shoplifting. What's happening is that children with impossible abilities are disappearing into government black sites, and the man with the blue flower is collecting them like stamps. What's happening is that a 7-year-old girl can see tomorrow's headlines, and someone is using that gift to shape the future according to their own twisted agenda. But I can't tell Julia that. Not over the phone, not when she's already holding herself together with spit and prayer. I'll explain when I get there. 30 minutes. After she hangs up, I sit in the cold office and stare at the drawing. The countdown feeling Julia mentioned has settled in my bones like arthritis, a constant ache that reminds me that time is running out. Today is the day Sophie drew me dying in this office. Today is the day the man with the blue flower expects to collect another gifted child. Today is the day I find out if the future can be changed or if it's already written in red crayon and childhood terror. I holster my .38, check my pockets for spare ammunition, and grab my coat from the back of the chair. The drawing goes into my jacket pocket, next to my heart, where it feels like carrying around my own death certificate. Outside, the morning fog rolls in from the harbor, turning the familiar streets into something alien and uncertain. But I've spent too many years walking through uncertainty to let a little weather slow me down. Julia's blue house with white shutters is waiting, and somewhere inside, a 7-year-old girl is drawing the same funeral over and over, circling today's date like a promise she can't break. The uncomfortable heat spreads from my chest to my throat, sharp and urgent. I've got work to do, and not much time to do it. The future is coming whether I like it or not, but I'll be damned if I let it happen without a fight. The drive to Maple Street takes me through neighborhoods that used to feel safe, past coffee shops and elementary schools, and the kinds of houses where families eat breakfast together and argue about homework. But this morning, the fog turns everything into a question mark. Street signs emerge from the gray like accusations, and every shadow could be hiding something that doesn't belong. My hands grip the steering wheel tight enough to leave impressions, and I catch myself checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. The drawing in my jacket pocket feels heavier with each mile, like carrying around a piece of lead shaped like my own mortality. The radio plays classic rock between bursts of static, but the music sounds thin and distant, as if it's coming from another world where people still believe in happy endings. I turn onto Maple Street and hit the brakes hard enough to make the tires squeal. The entire block looks like a crime scene waiting to happen. 3 unmarked sedans sit at precise intervals along the curb, their dark windows reflecting the morning fog like blind eyes. A police barrier stretches across the street 50 yards from Julia's house, manned by a uniformed officer who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. An ambulance idles at the corner, its engine running but its lights dark, as if it's waiting for someone to need emergency transport. The blue house with white shutters sits in the middle of it all like the eye of a hurricane, normal and innocent and completely surrounded by the kind of official attention that makes innocent people disappear. I park behind one of the unmarked cars and walk toward the barrier. The officer is young, maybe 25, with the kind of fresh-faced earnestness that hasn't been beaten out of him yet. His nameplate reads Martinez, and when he sees me approaching, his hand drifts toward his radio. "Sir, this is a restricted area. You'll need to— Ray Marshall, private investigator." I show him my license, the one that's gotten me through more doors than I care to count. "I'm working with the family." Martinez studies the license like it's written in hieroglyphics, then looks at me with the kind of suspicion they teach in police academy. "You'll need to wait here while I check with— Martinez?" The voice comes from behind him, sharp and authoritative. A woman in a navy suit approaches, her stride confident and purposeful. She's tall, athletic, with short dark hair, and the kind of sharp features that suggest she's used to being the smartest person in the room. "Let him through." Martinez steps aside without argument, and the woman extends her hand. "Agent Sarah Collins, FBI. We spoke on the phone yesterday." I remember the call, the favor I'd asked from an old friend who owed me more than one. Collins isn't the friend. She's someone else entirely. Someone with clearance high enough to know about Cerberus dynamics and the patience to explain why I should be terrified. "Bit of a response for a domestic situation," I observe, looking at the assembled vehicles. "This stopped being domestic the moment your friend Julia mentioned her daughter's abilities." Collins falls into step beside me as we walk toward the house. We've been monitoring several similar cases across the country. Children with unusual predictive capabilities. Most of them have disappeared. Disappeared or relocated. In cases involving Cerberus, there's usually no difference. The front door opens before we reach it. Julia stands in the frame, and she looks like she's aged 10 years overnight. Her hair hangs loose around her face, and her eyes are red-rimmed and hollow. She's still wearing yesterday's clothes, wrinkled now and stained with what looks like coffee and tears. Ray, thank God. She pulls me into a hug that feels desperate, clinging. I didn't know who else to call. They just showed up this morning asking questions about Sophie, about her drawings. Where is she? Hallway. She won't move from there, won't eat, won't speak. But Ray... Julia's voice cracks, and she leads me into the living room. She drew something new. The coffee table is covered with papers, dozens of them, all showing the same scene from different angles. A hospital room, sterile and white, with banks of monitors and IV stands clustered around a single bed. The figure in the bed is small and still, face turned away from the viewer, but there are details that make my blood run cold. A watch on the left wrist, scratched and tarnished. The same watch I've worn for 15 years. A scar on the back of the right hand, thin and pale. The scar I got when I was 12 fell off my bike trying to impress a girl whose name I can't remember. The hospital gown hangs loose on a frame that's too thin, too angular. My frame, rendered in careful crayon strokes that capture every detail of a body I've lived in for 63 years. She drew this after you called? My voice sounds strange, like it's coming from someone else's throat. Right after I hung up. Didn't stop until she'd filled 20 sheets of paper with it. Julia's hands shake as she gathers the drawings. Ray, what does this mean? First your death, now this. What's happening to my daughter? I stare at the drawings, at my own unconscious form, surrounded by machines that breathe for people who can't breathe for themselves. In some of the pictures, there are figures standing beside the bed, doctors, nurses, people in suits. In others, the bed is empty except for the monitors, their screens showing flat lines that stretch into infinity. It means someone's escalating the timeline. Agent Collins appears beside me, studying the drawings with the clinical detachment of someone who's seen too much strangeness to be surprised by anything. The original drawing showed death. These show what comes before death, the fight, the machines, the desperate measures. Or what comes after, I say quietly. What happens when death doesn't take the first time? Julia sinks into the couch, her face pale as newspaper. She's in the hallway, she whispers, just sitting there staring at nothing. Her hands won't stop shaking. I find Sophie exactly where Julia said she'd be, sitting cross-legged in the narrow hallway that leads to the bedrooms. She's pressed against the wall like she's trying to disappear into it, her arms wrapped around her knees, her storm-cloud eyes focused on something only she can see. Her hands are stained black with ink and charcoal, and they tremble like leaves in a wind I can't feel. She doesn't look at me when I approach, doesn't acknowledge my presence at all. But when I sit down beside her, she leans slightly in my direction, as if seeking warmth from a fire that's almost gone out. Sophie, I say quietly, can you hear me? No response. Just the shallow breathing of a child who's seen too much, drawn too much, carried too heavy a burden for someone who should be worried about multiplication tables and playground politics. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we need to figure this out together. Her lips move, barely a whisper. The man with the blue flower knows what you dream. I reach out slowly, the way you'd approach a wounded animal, but Sophie flinches away from my touch like I'm made of electricity. Her whole body goes rigid, pressing deeper into the wall, and for a moment I see something flicker across her face. Not fear exactly, but recognition, like she's seeing through me to something that hasn't happened yet. Sophie, it's me. Ray. I'm not going to hurt you. You can't stop it. Her voice is barely audible, a whisper that seems to come from somewhere far away. He showed me. In the dream, you try to save everyone, but the pictures are already drawn. The hallway feels smaller suddenly, like the walls are closing in. Family photographs line the space. Julia and Sophie at the zoo, at birthday parties, normal moments frozen in frames that feel like artifacts from another world. But Sophie's eyes don't see any of it. They're focused on something else, something only she can perceive. Who showed you? The man with the blue flower? A shudder runs through her small frame. He was here, last night, after you left. He stood right where you're sitting. My blood turns to ice water. Sophie, you need to tell me exactly what happened. He didn't knock, didn't use the door. I was in my room trying to sleep, and then he was just there, in the doorway, smiling. Her voice gets smaller with each word. He said I was special, said he could help me understand the pictures better. I glance back toward the living room where Julia's voice mingles with Agent Collins, both women speaking in the hushed tones people use when discussing disasters. They don't know. Julia doesn't know that Dr. Martin Glaze was in her house, in her daughter's bedroom, while she slept 20 feet away. What else did he say? Sophie's hands stop shaking for a moment, and she looks directly at me for the first time since I sat down. Her storm cloud eyes are huge in her pale face, and they hold the kind of knowledge that children shouldn't possess. He knows what you dream about, the little girl who died, the one who looked like me. Her voice is matter-of-fact, like she's discussing the weather. He said you couldn't save her, and you can't save me either. But that's okay, because some people are meant to be saved, and some people are meant to draw the pictures. The hallway tilts slightly, and I have to put my hand against the wall to steady myself. I've never told anyone about the dreams, about the way Ellen's daughter visits me in sleep, forever 7 years old, forever asking why I wasn't there when she needed me most. That knowledge died with Ellen, buried in a closed casket under 6 feet of Illinois soil. Sophie, did he touch you? Did he hurt you? He showed me pictures. Other children like me. They were drawing in a big room with white walls and no windows. They looked, she pauses, searching for the right word, empty, like someone had erased everything inside them except the pictures. I hear footsteps in the living room, Julia's voice rising in pitch. Sophie? Ray? Is everything okay? We're fine, I call back. But my voice sounds strained even to my own ears. I lean closer to Sophie, keeping my voice low. Did he take anything? Leave anything behind? He touched my drawings. The ones of you dying, the ones of you in the hospital. He said they were very good, very accurate. He said the future was already written, and all I had to do was keep drawing it. Julia appears at the end of the hallway, Agent Collins beside her. Julia's face is pale, her hands clutched together like she's praying. When she sees Sophie pressed against the wall, her maternal instincts override everything else. Sophie, sweetheart, what's wrong? The man with the blue flower was here, Sophie whispers. Julia's face goes white as paper. What man? Sophie, what are you talking about? Dr. Glaze, I say, standing slowly. The one who gave you the blue flower at the school. Sophie says he was here last night. That's impossible. I would have heard the alarm system. Julia's words tumble over each other in panic. Sophie, are you sure? Maybe it was a dream, maybe. He stood right there. Sophie points to where I'd been sitting. He smelled like hospitals and flowers. He said Julia was sleeping very deeply because of the medicine. What medicine? Agent Collins steps forward, her voice sharp with professional interest. Julia's hand flies to her throat. I had a headache yesterday. Took some Tylenol PM. I never sleep that deeply, but last night... She trails off, realization dawning in her eyes. I'm already moving toward the front door, my mind racing through possibilities. The doorbell camera, mounted discreetly beside the entrance, should have recorded everything. Motion sensors, infrared recording, the works. If Dr. Glaze was here, if he somehow got inside without Julia hearing, there would be evidence. The camera housing is intact, the little red light blinking normally. I pull out my phone, navigate to the app Julia showed me how to use when I first started visiting. The interface loads normally, shows the usual menu options. But when I try to access last night's footage, I find nothing. Not corrupted files, not system errors. Nothing. As if the hours between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. simply don't exist in the camera's memory. The footage is gone, I tell Agent Collins when she joins me on the porch. Professionally erased, not just deleted. That takes specialized equipment and knowledge, she says quietly. The kind of resources that Cerberus has access to. Julia appears in the doorway, Sophie clinging to her leg like a lifeline. I don't understand. How could someone get in witut me hearing? How could they erase the camera footage? Because they're not just watching, I say, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. They're actively manipulating the situation. The blue flower you wore, it wasn't just a gift. It was a signal, a way to mark you as compliant. The headache medicine you took, I'm betting if we tested it, we'd find more than just acetaminophen. Sophie looks up at me with those storm cloud eyes, and when she speaks, her voice carries the weight of absolute certainty. He's coming back today. I can see it in the pictures that haven't been drawn yet. And next time, he's not coming alone. The comfortable heat in my chest transforms into something harder, something that feels like rage wrapped in ice. This isn't just about missing children anymore. This is about a 7-year-old girl being stalked by predators who use government resources and pharmaceutical expertise to hunt their prey. This is about the future being written by people who view children as tools instead of souls. And I'm running out of time to change the ending. By midday, I've made a decision that probably violates every child safety protocol ever written. Sophie sits in the passenger seat of my car, her sketchpad clutched against her chest like armor against a world that's too big and too cruel for someone her size. She hasn't spoken since we left Julia's house, just stared through the windshield with those storm cloud eyes that seem to see everything and nothing at once. We're going to my office, I tell her as we navigate through downtown traffic. It's not much, but it's safe. And it's got a good view of the street so we can see anyone coming. She nods once, a tiny movement that could mean anything or nothing. Her fingers tap against the sketchpad in a nervous rhythm, and I catch glimpses of her latest drawing, stick figures that look like they're running, but I can't tell if they're running toward something or away from it. The office building looks even shabbier in broad daylight, its brick facade stained with decades of city grime and broken promises. The Chinese restaurant below sends up its usual aromatic cloud of garlic and ginger, and I can hear the lunch crowd chattering through the thin walls. Normal sounds, normal smells, the kind of everyday life that feels like a luxury when you're living on borrowed time. Sophie follows me up the narrow stairs without complaint, her small hand trailing along the banister like she's trying to anchor herself to something solid. When I unlock the office door, she steps inside and immediately claims the client chair across from my desk, settling into it with the careful precision of someone who's learned to make herself small in hostile spaces. You can draw if you want, I tell her, clearing a space on my desk. But maybe you could try drawing happy things. Things that haven't happened yet but could happen. Good things. She considers this for a moment, then opens her sketchpad to a fresh page. I'll try. But the pictures want to be what they want to be. Sometimes they don't listen to me. I set her up with a cup of water and some crackers from my desk drawer, the kind of emergency rations that constitute fine dining in my current economic bracket. Then I boot up my laptop and dive back into the digital rabbit hole that is Cerberus Dynamics. Agent Collins calls as I'm scrolling through a list of defense contracts that read like a shopping list for dystopian nightmares. Ray, we need to talk. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this conversation, understood? Understood. Cerberus isn't just recruiting gifted children. They're manufacturing them. Her voice is tight, controlled, the way cops sound when they're discussing particularly ugly crime scenes. We've traced pharmaceutical shipments to 12 cities where children with predictive abilities have surfaced. Experimental drugs designed to enhance pattern recognition and temporal perception. I glance at Sophie, who's drawing what looks like a house with a picket fence and flowers in the yard. For a moment, it almost looks normal, the kind of thing any 7-year-old might draw on a sunny afternoon. You're saying they're drugging kids to make them psychic? I'm saying they're conducting unauthorized medical experiments on children in foster care, children who won't be missed if they disappear. Sophie wasn't born with her abilities, Ray. They were induced. The office suddenly feels too small, too warm. I think about Sophie's flu, the high fever that preceded her first prophetic drawing. I think about Julia mentioning that Sophie had been through hell in foster care, bounced between homes where no one cared enough to ask the right questions. How many children are we talking about? Nationwide? We estimate at least 50 over the past 3 years. That's just the ones we know about. Collins pauses, and I can hear papers rustling in the background. Ray, they're not just using these children as early warning systems. They're weaponizing them, teaching them to draw specific futures, then working to make those futures happen. Economic predictions, political outcomes, assassinations, market crashes, natural disasters that can be triggered by human intervention. Her voice drops to barely above a whisper. We found communication logs between Cerberus and a cell in the Department of Defense. They're calling it Project Tomorrow. The ability to shape future events by predicting and then manipulating the variables that lead to specific outcomes. I watch Sophie add a swing set to her drawing, her small hands steady now, focused on creating something beautiful instead of something terrible. But even as she draws happiness, I can see the tension in her shoulders, the way she keeps glancing at the window as if expecting unwanted visitors. What's their endgame? Control. Complete control over the information flow that shapes political and economic decisions. Imagine knowing every stock market fluctuation, every election outcome, every terrorist attack before it happens. Now imagine being able to influence those outcomes through targeted interventions. And the children? Assets. Disposable assets. When they're used up, or when they start drawing things that contradict the desired narrative, they're retired. The word retired hangs in the air like poisoned smoke. We both know what it means in intelligence parlance. It doesn't involve pension plans and gold watches. After Collins hangs up, I stare at the screen for a long time, scrolling through case files that document the systematic harvesting of children's minds. Missing persons reports that were filed and then mysteriously withdrawn. Foster care records that show children being transferred to facilities that don't exist on any official registry. Financial records showing payments to doctors who specialize in pharmaceutical enhancement of cognitive abilities. It's a bureaucratic nightmare wrapped in scientific terminology, but at its core, it's the oldest crime in the book: adults hurting children for profit. I'm so absorbed in the files that I almost miss the sound of paper tearing. Sophie has stopped drawing the happy house and is methodically ripping something into small pieces. When I look closer, I see she's destroying a drawing I hadn't noticed her making. Something darker, more detailed than the stick figures and simple shapes she usually creates. Sophie, what was that picture? I didn't mean to draw it. It just happened. She drops the torn pieces into my wastebasket, then immediately goes back to her drawing of the house with the picket fence. After she's absorbed in her happy picture, I fish the torn pieces from the trash and spread them on my desk like a jigsaw puzzle. It takes several minutes to arrange them properly, but when I do, my blood runs cold. The drawing shows 3 men in dark suits standing around an open grave. The perspective is from ground level, looking up at their faces as they stare down into the hole. One of the men wears a blue flower on his lapel, clearly visible even in Sophie's childish rendering. but it's what's growing from the coffin at the bottom of the grave that makes my hands shake. Another blue flower, silk petals bright against the dark wood, roots that spread like veins through the earth beneath. And carved into the headstone, barely visible in the cramped space of a child's drawing, are the words, "The future ends here." Sophie looks up from her happy house, meets my eyes with that storm cloud gaze that sees too much. "Sometimes," she says quietly, "the pictures draw themselves." Julia bursts through my office door like a woman fleeing fire, her face flushed and streaked with tears, her hands shaking so badly she can barely turn the knob. She's changed clothes since this morning, but her new outfit hangs on her frame like it was borrowed from someone else, someone who still believed in normal Tuesday afternoons and predictable tomorrows. "Ray, they tried to get in." The words tumble out between gasps for air, as if she's been running. "While we were gone, while Sophie was here with you, they tried to break into the house." Sophie looks up from her drawing of the house with the picket fence, her storm cloud eyes immediately shifting to something darker, more alert. The happy crayon in her hand, a cheerful yellow that was coloring sunshine, slips from her fingers and rolls across the desk. "Who tried to get in?" I'm already moving toward Julia, guiding her to the spare chair beside Sophie's. "Police? Unmarked cars? No, not police. Neighbors." Julia's voice cracks on the word. "Mrs. Chen from across the street called me. Said she saw two men in coveralls trying to jimmy the back door. When she shouted at them, they just walked away. Casual, like they were supposed to be there." I pour water from the pitcher on my filing cabinet into a paper cup and hand it to Julia. Her fingers wrap around it like it's an anchor, something solid in a world that started to feel dangerously fluid. "Did Mrs. Chen get a good look at them?" "Professional looking," she said. "Clean uniforms, tool belts, the kind of men who fix things for a living." "But Ray—" Julia takes a sip of water, and I can see her trying to pull herself together, to think through the fear. "Mrs. Chen said they had a van, white, unmarked, but with government plates. She used to work for the DMV. She knows the difference." Sophie has abandoned her happy drawing entirely. Instead, she's pulled a fresh sheet of paper from her sketch pad and is drawing with quick, urgent strokes. Her face has gone pale again, and that distant look has returned to her eyes. "They weren't trying to break in," I say, pieces clicking together in my mind. "They were installing something, surveillance equipment, listening devices. When Mrs. Chen interrupted them, they had to abort, but they'll be back." "How do you know that?" "Because they're not just watching anymore. They're preparing for extraction." I think about the torn drawing in my wastebasket, about 3 men standing around a grave. "Julia, you can't go back to that house. Not tonight, maybe not ever." The reality of what I'm saying hits her like a physical blow. She sets down the water cup with shaking hands and stares at me, with the kind of desperate hope that parents cling to when their children are drowning. "What are we going to do? Where are we going to go? I don't have family, don't have anywhere safe to—" "Mama!" Sophie's voice cuts through Julia's panic with the clear precision of a bell. "Look!" The drawing she's been working on covers most of the page now, rendered in orange and red and black crayon strokes that seem to flicker like real flames. It's St. Augustine Elementary School, but not as we saw it this morning through the fog. This version has windows that glow orange like jack-o'-lantern eyes, and smoke pouring from the roof in thick, dark spirals. But it's not the building that makes my chest tight. It's the figures visible through those glowing windows, small shapes pressed against the glass, their faces turned outward, their mouths open in what can only be screams. "Sophie, when is this happening?" Julia's voice is barely a whisper. "Today, after lunch. The fire starts in the basement, spreads through the ventilation system." Sophie's crayon moves across the paper, adding details that make the scene more horrific. "But it's not an accident. Someone wants all the special children in one place. I lean closer, studying the drawing. In the parking lot, barely visible among the fire trucks and ambulances that haven't arrived yet, is a white van with tinted windows. And standing beside it, watching the chaos with professional interest, is a figure in a dark suit with something small and blue pinned to his lapel. They're going to burn down the school? No. Sophie looks up at me with those storm cloud eyes, and for a moment she looks far older than 7. They're going to rescue the special children. Save them from the fire. Be heroes. And when the children are safe, they'll take them somewhere to recover from the trauma. Somewhere they'll never be seen again, I finish. Julia makes a sound that might be a sob or might be a scream. She reaches for Sophie, pulls her daughter close, and for a moment they cling to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. We have to warn them, Julia says. The school, the other children. Warn them about what? A fire that hasn't happened yet, based on a drawing by a 7-year-old? I shake my head. We need evidence, proof, something that will hold up long enough to evacuate the building. Sophie pulls away from her mother's embrace and looks directly at me. When she speaks, her voice carries a weight that children shouldn't have to bear. Mr. Marshall, can you change what I see? Can you make the pictures turn out different? The question hangs in the air like smoke. It's the same question I've been asking myself since this whole nightmare started, the same question that's kept me up at night, staring at drawings of my own death. Can the future be changed, or is it already written in red crayon and childhood terror? I don't know, Sophie, but I'm damn sure going to try. She nods once, then turns back to her drawing, but instead of adding more flames or more screaming figures, she starts drawing something else in the corner of the page. A figure in a rumpled coat and fedora, standing in front of the school's main entrance. The figure is small, barely visible against the chaos of the fire, but it's clearly there, clearly fighting back. Sometimes, Sophie says quietly, the pictures change when someone brave enough decides they should. The office feels different at night, when the city sleeps, and the only sounds are the distant hum of traffic and the occasional siren cutting through the darkness. Julia and Sophie are asleep on the narrow couch I dragged up from the storage room, Sophie curled against her mother's side like a question mark made of childhood and fear. Their breathing is shallow, restless, the kind of sleep that comes when your body demands rest, but your mind refuses to let go of the day's terrors. I sit at my desk surrounded by the accumulated evidence of a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of government and the darkest corners of human nature. Case files spread across every surface, photographs of missing children pinned to the wall like a gallery of the damned. The laptop screen glows blue in the darkness, displaying financial records that trace the flow of money from defense contractors to pharmaceutical companies to the kind of shell organizations that exist only to hide worse crimes. At the center of it all is Sophie's drawing of the school fire, propped against my desk lamp where I can see every terrible detail. The orange windows, the screaming faces, the white van waiting in the parking lot like a hearse dressed up as salvation. In the corner, barely visible, is the small figure in the rumpled coat, me, standing against the inevitable like a scarecrow in a hurricane. My hands are steady as I review the timeline, but there's that familiar warmth in my chest, the uncomfortable heat I've learned to recognize as guilt mixed with something harder, something that might be determination. The pieces fit together with the precision of a Swiss watch, each gear turning the next in a mechanism designed to harvest children's minds and sell their futures to the highest bidder. The exhaustion hits me like a physical weight, and for a moment I let my eyes close. Sleep doesn't come, but something else does. A memory I've spent 5 years trying to bury, sharp and clear as broken glass. The call came at 3 a.m, the same time Julia called me yesterday. Ellen's voice, high and desperate, saying there'd been an accident. Katie, our daughter, 7 years old and full of light, had been hit by a drunk driver while riding her bike to her friend's house. I was in Chicago, chasing leads on a case that seemed important at the time, something about police corruption that felt like it could make my career. "She's asking for you," Ellen said, and I could hear the sound of hospital machinery in the background, the beeping and hissing that accompanies the fight between life and death. "Ray, she's asking for her daddy." But I was 3 hours away, and the case was so close to breaking open. Just one more interview, one more piece of evidence, and I could crack the whole thing wide. I told Ellen I'd catch the next flight, told her to tell Katie that Daddy was coming, that everything would be okay. Katie died while I was sitting in a bar with a corrupt cop, buying him drinks and pretending to be his friend. She died asking for me, and I wasn't there. Ellen never forgave me, and neither did I. The memory fades, but the guilt remains, sharp and familiar as an old scar. I open my eyes and look at Sophie, at the way she sleeps with her fists clenched, even in unconsciousness prepared to fight. She's the same age Katie was, the same mix of vulnerability and strength that children carry like a secret weapon against the world's cruelty. But this time, I'm here. This time, I'm not 3 hours away chasing the next case, the next lead, the next chance to prove myself. This time, I'm sitting in a cramped office above a Chinese restaurant, loading bullets into a gun I hoped never to fire again, preparing to stand between a child and the people who want to use her gifts to reshape the world. The phone rings, cutting through the silence like a blade. I answer before the second ring, keeping my voice low to avoid waking Sophie and Julia. "Marshall." "Ray, thank God." Agent Collins sounds breathless, urgent. "They know where you are. Cerberus has a tactical team en route to your location. You have maybe 20 minutes before they breach the building." I look at the window, at the street below, bathed in sodium light and shadow. Everything looks normal. A few late-night pedestrians, the occasional car, the familiar neon glow of the bail bondsman's sign. But normalcy is an illusion I can no longer afford to believe in. "How many?" "6-man team, full tactical gear. They're not coming to talk, Ray. They're coming to clean up loose ends." The uncomfortable heat spreads from my chest to my throat, making it hard to swallow. "What about the school? The fire Sophie drew?" "We evacuated based on an anonymous bomb threat. Got all the children out safely, including the 3 other kids with predictive abilities. Cerberus lost their primary targets, which means they're moving to contingency plans." "Which are?" "Eliminate the witnesses. All of them." Collins pauses, and I can hear the weight of what she's not saying. "Ray, these aren't federal agents. They're private contractors with a license to operate outside normal legal constraints. If they take Sophie, she'll disappear into a black site program that doesn't officially exist." I stand slowly, my knees protesting the movement. The .38 feels heavier than it should in my hand, loaded with 6 bullets that might be enough or might not be nearly enough. "What about backup? FBI support?" "I'm working on it, but the authorization is tied up in bureaucratic red tape. Cerberus has people at every level of government. By the time I get official approval, it'll be too late." Sophie stirs on the couch, her storm cloud eyes opening to find mine in the darkness. She doesn't look surprised to see me standing with a gun in my hand. If anything, she looks relieved, like someone who's been waiting for the other shoe to drop, finally getting confirmation that their worst fears were justified. "They're coming," she says quietly. "It's not a question." "Yes, but we're ready for them." She sits up carefully, trying not to wake Julia, and pads over to my desk. Her latest drawing is there, the one of the school fire. But as I watch, she picks up a crayon and starts adding details to the corner where she'd drawn my figure. "What are you doing?" "Changing the picture," she says, her voice matter of fact. "You asked if I could do that. I'm trying." In the drawing, the small figure in the rumpled coat grows clearer. She adds a gun to his hand, determination to his posture, and something else. Other figures behind him, people in suits with badges, cars with flashing lights. "Backup arriving just in time." Can you really change it? Sophie looks up at me with those eyes that see too much, too far, too clearly. I don't know. But I drew you asking that question 3 days ago, and I drew you asking it now, and I drew what comes next. What comes next? She doesn't answer, just keeps drawing. But in the orange light of her crayon flames, I can see something new taking shape. Hope, maybe. Or maybe just the stubborn refusal of a 7-year-old girl to let the bad men win. Either way, it's enough. I check my gun one more time, count the bullets again, and prepare to find out if the future can be changed by people brave enough to decide it should be. The desk slides across the floor with the grinding protest of wood against linoleum, leaving scratches that will outlast whatever happens tonight. I wedge it against the door, then stack the filing cabinet on top for good measure. The barricade looks pathetic. Office furniture against trained killers. But it might buy us 30 seconds, and 30 seconds can mean the difference between breathing and not breathing. My hands are steady as I check the .38 for the third time in 10 minutes. 6 bullets! Against 6 men with military training and equipment that costs more than I make in a year. The math doesn't work in my favor, but mathematics never stopped a desperate man from trying to protect what matters. Julia stands at the window like a sentinel, her face pressed against the glass, phone clutched in her white-knuckled grip. She's been there for 20 minutes, watching the street below with the focused intensity of someone who knows that salvation and damnation both wear the same dark uniforms. Every few seconds, she glances back at Sophie, then returns to her vigil, as if her constant surveillance can somehow ward off the inevitable. "Anything?" I ask, though I already know the answer. "Nothing yet, but the rain's getting worse. I can barely see the streetlights." Her voice is thin, stretched tight as piano wire. Maybe the weather will slow them down. The rain hammers against the windows with increasing fury, each drop like a bullet against glass. It's the kind of storm that drowns out footsteps and muffles screams, the kind that makes hunting easier for predators who prefer to work in darkness. I can hear sirens in the distance, but they're fading rather than approaching, called away to other emergencies that suddenly seem urgent tonight. Sophie sleeps in the corner I've made for her, surrounded by blankets I scrounged from the storage closet and cushions from the couch. Her drawings are scattered around her like fallen leaves, pictures of houses with picket fences, stick figures holding hands, the kind of innocent art that children create when they're trying to remember what happiness looks like. But even in sleep, her face is tense, her small hands clenched into fists. She mutters something I can't understand, then shifts restlessly. Her breathing quickens, and for a moment I think she's about to wake up. Instead, she reaches for her sketchpad with eyes still closed, her fingers moving across the paper in patterns that make no sense. Sleep drawing, creating visions of tomorrow while her conscious mind rests. I don't look at what she's creating. I've seen enough of her pictures to last several lifetimes. The office feels different in the darkness, smaller and more vulnerable than it did in daylight. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every sound from the street below could signal the beginning of the end. The Chinese restaurant has closed for the night, leaving behind only the lingering aroma of garlic and the memory of normal people doing normal things. The neon sign across the street flickers erratically, painting the walls in intermittent pink light that makes everything look like a crime scene waiting to happen. I settle into my chair, positioning myself between the door and Sophie's makeshift bed. The gun rests on my thigh, safety off, finger resting beside the trigger guard. My chest burns with that familiar, uncomfortable heat, the same feeling I had 15 years ago when I sat in a hospital waiting room watching Ellen cry over our daughter's broken body. Katie had been asking for me when she died. 7 years old, same as Sophie, same wide eyes and infinite trust in a world that doesn't deserve children's faith. I'd failed her then, chosen a case over my family, chosen the next lead over being there when she needed me most. The drunk driver who killed her got 5 years and served 3. I got a lifetime of guilt and the knowledge that some failures can't be undone. But this time is different. This time I'm here. This time I'm not 3 hours away chasing shadows and false promises. This time, when they come for the child who's too young to understand why adults want to hurt her, they'll have to go through me first. The rain intensifies, drumming against the roof with machine gun persistence. Lightning flickers somewhere in the distance, followed by thunder that rolls across the city like the footsteps of giants. Julia starts at the sound, her phone nearly slipping from her hand. "How long has it been?" she asks. I check my watch. 43 minutes since Collins called. Maybe they decided not to come. Maybe the weather. They're coming. I keep my voice gentle, but there's no point in false hope. These aren't the kind of people who let weather interfere with business. Sophie stirs again, and this time her eyes open. She doesn't look confused or disoriented the way children usually do when waking in strange places. Instead, she looks directly at me with those storm cloud eyes that see too much. "They're close," she whispers. "I can feel them in the rain." Julia turns from the window, her face pale in the intermittent neon light. "Feel them how?" "They're angry and scared. They didn't expect us to run." Sophie sits up slowly, clutching her latest drawing against her chest. "The man with the blue flower is with them. He's telling them that I'm dangerous, that I need to be contained." The word contained hits me like a physical blow. It's the same language they use for toxic waste and nuclear materials, the kind of clinical terminology that makes it easier to do terrible things to human beings. "Sophie, I need you to listen to me." I lean forward, keeping my voice steady despite the ice forming in my veins. "When they come, and they will come, I want you to stay behind me. No matter what happens, no matter what they say, you stay behind me. Can you do that?" She nods once, then unfolds the drawing she's been clutching. It shows 3 figures silhouetted against a wall, a tall man, a woman, and a small child. The man is holding something that could be a gun. The woman has her arms spread wide as if trying to shield the others. The child is reaching upward, toward something outside the frame. "I drew this while I was sleeping," Sophie says. "I don't know what it means yet, but I think I do. I think it means that when the moment comes, when the choice has to be made between safety and sacrifice, we'll stand together. Whatever happens next, whatever price has to be paid, we'll face it as a family. Not the family we were born into, but the family we've chosen in the space of 48 hours, and a shared understanding that some things are worth fighting for." The thunder rolls again, closer this time, and in its wake comes a sound that makes my blood freeze. Footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, professional. They're here. The knock comes at exactly 2:07 a.m., 3 measured raps that sound like a metronome keeping time for a funeral march. Not the urgent pounding of police or the hesitant tapping of late-night visitors, but something else entirely. The kind of knock that says, "We know you're in there, we know you're listening, and we have all the time in the world." Julia freezes at the window, her reflection ghost-like in the rain-streaked glass. Sophie doesn't move from her nest of blankets, but her eyes are open now, wide and alert, tracking sounds I can't hear. The .38 feels heavier in my hand, its metal warm from my grip. "Federal agents," a voice calls through the door. Calm, professional, the kind of tone used for routine business. "We're here about the child welfare situation. Please open the door so we can discuss this civilly." Bullshit. Federal agents don't make house calls at 2 in the morning, and they sure as hell don't talk about child welfare situations like they're discussing the weather. But the voice has authority, the kind that comes from years of being obeyed without question. I gesture for Julia to move away from the window, then position myself beside the door frame. "Let me see some identification." "Of course." A pause, then the sound of leather against fabric. I'm sliding my credentials under the door. The badge case appears in the gap beneath the door, official-looking and probably authentic. "Dr. Martin Glaze," it says, with some kind of federal designation that looks impressive and means nothing. In the tiny photograph, his pale blue eyes stare out with the same clinical interest I remember from outside the school. "Dr. Glaze." I keep my voice steady, conversational. "Little late for a wellness check, isn't it?" "I'm afraid the situation has escalated beyond normal protocols. Sophie is in immediate danger, Mr. Marshall. We need to relocate her to a secure facility for her own protection." Through the rain-lashed window, I catch a glimpse of movement in the alley across the street. A figure in dark clothing pressed against the brick wall, gesturing with what looks like tactical hand signals. Agent Collins, keeping her promise about backup even if it's only her. She catches my attention, holds up 3 fingers, then points toward the hallway outside my door. 3 men, just as Collins predicted. She makes a cutting motion across her throat, then points to her watch. "No backup coming in time?" "Protection from what?" I ask, stalling for time I don't have. "From people who would exploit her abilities for personal gain." "Sophie has a remarkable gift, Mr. Marshall, but without proper guidance and scientific oversight, that gift could be dangerous. To herself and to others." The words flow like honey over broken glass, sweet and reasonable and completely poisonous. I've heard this tone before, in courtrooms where child molesters explained how they were only trying to help, in interview rooms where corrupt cops justified their crimes as necessary for the greater good. "You mean like your friend who broke into Julia's house last night?" A moment of silence. When Dr. Glaze speaks again, the honey has crystallized into something harder. "Mr. Marshall, I understand your protective instincts. They're admirable, really. But you're interfering with a federal investigation into matters of national security. Sophie's drawings have provided intelligence that could prevent terrorist attacks, natural disasters, economic collapse. We're not the villains here." Sophie sits up slowly, her storm cloud eyes finding mine across the dark office. She doesn't speak, but I can see the terror in her face, the knowledge of what these men really want to do with her gift. Behind that terror is something else, a plea, desperate and silent. "Don't let them take me." "The child is frightened," Dr. Glaze continues, his voice taking on the professionally soothing tone of someone trained in manipulation. "Traumatized by abilities she doesn't understand. We have facilities specifically designed for children like Sophie, places where she can learn to control her gift without the burden of adult fears and prejudices." Julia has moved to stand behind Sophie, her hands protective on the child's shoulders. In the intermittent neon light, they look like a portrait of everything worth protecting: innocence and love, vulnerability and strength. "What kind of facilities?" Julia's voice is barely above a whisper. "Residential schools. The finest educational and medical care available. Sophie would be with other children who share her abilities, children who understand what she's going through. She wouldn't be alone anymore." The lie slides off his tongue with practiced ease. "Other children who share her abilities, the ones who've disappeared without trace, the ones who don't draw happy pictures anymore, the ones who've been turned into psychic weapons for people who view human souls as ammunition." "And if we refuse?" I ask. "Then you'd be placing Sophie in very real danger. There are others interested in her abilities, Mr. Marshall. Private contractors, foreign intelligence services, criminal organizations that would use a child like Sophie for their own purposes. We're offering protection. The alternative is much less pleasant." Sophie bolts upright suddenly, her face pale as moonlight. When she speaks, her voice carries the weight of absolute certainty. "They're going to hurt you if I go with them." Her small hands clutch at my sleeve. "I can see it. They make you disappear. Julia, too. Anyone who knows about me." The truth hits the room like a physical blow. This isn't about protection or national security or helping a troubled child. This is about eliminating witnesses, cleaning up loose ends, making sure that no one can testify about what Cerberus Dynamics has been doing to children like Sophie. For a moment, I feel the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me like a collapsed building. It would be so easy to open the door, to hand Sophie over to people who claim they know what's best for her. The terror in her voice, the knowledge of what's coming. I could make it all stop with 6 words. Take her. Just leave us alone. But then I see Katie's face in my memory, 7 years old and asking for her daddy while I sat in a bar buying drinks for a corrupt cop. I see Ellen's tears, the way she looked at me in the hospital when she realized I'd chosen the job over our family one last time. I see 15 years of guilt and regret, and the knowledge that some failures echo through eternity. Not this time. I pull Sophie close, feel her small body trembling against mine, and make the only choice that matters. She's not going anywhere with you. The silence that follows feels like the pause between lightning and thunder, pregnant with violence waiting to be born. The door explodes inward with the sharp crack of splintering wood, my makeshift barricade sliding across the floor like it was made of cardboard instead of solid oak. The filing cabinet topples with a crash that sends papers flying like wounded birds, and suddenly the office is full of moving shadows and the acrid smell of cordite from whatever they used to breach the lock. The first man through wears tactical gear that costs more than my car, night vision goggles pushed up on his forehead, some kind of automatic weapon held with professional competence. He moves with the fluid grace of someone who's done this before, scanning the room for threats with mechanical precision. Behind him comes a second operative, identical gear, identical bearing, and behind them both, Dr. Martin Glaze, with his perfect suit and his blue flower lapel pin, looking like a funeral director who's arrived early for his appointment. "Nobody needs to get hurt," Dr. Glaze says, stepping carefully around the debris of my office furniture. "This can still be handled civilly." But Julia has other ideas. She appears from behind the overturned filing cabinet like an avenging angel, the pot of coffee I'd brewed hours ago clutched in her hands. The liquid is still hot enough to steam in the cool air, and when she flings the contents into the face of the nearest operative, his professional composure vanishes in a shriek of pain and rage. The man drops his weapon, clawing at his face with gloved hands, and suddenly the small office becomes a battlefield. The second operative swings his rifle toward Julia, but Agent Collins crashes through the window in an explosion of glass and rain, tackling him before he can fire. They hit the floor hard, rolling between the scattered furniture, her FBI credentials forgotten in favor of simple violence. I'm moving before conscious thought kicks in, the .38 heavy in my hand, my body acting on instincts older than reason. But Dr. Glaze is faster than he looks, producing a syringe from his jacket pocket with the smooth efficiency of a magician revealing his trick. "For the program," he says, his voice clinical even as chaos erupts around him. "Sophie's integration will be much smoother if she's sedated during transport. Less traumatic for everyone involved." The syringe gleams in the harsh light from the overturned desk lamp, its contents clear as water and probably just as lethal. I've seen what Cerberus does to children, the empty eyes of kids who've had their souls surgically removed, leaving only the ability to draw tomorrow's tragedies. Whatever's in that needle, it's not medication. It's erasure, the chemical lobotomy of a 7-year-old's humanity. Sophie scrambles behind the couch, clutching her sketchpad like armor, but there's nowhere to run in the confined space. "Doctor." Glaze advances on her with the patient persistence of a predator who knows his prey is trapped, the syringe held like a weapon designed for mercy killing. "Stay away from her." My voice comes out as a growl, barely human. "Mr. Marshall, please be reasonable. Sophie belongs with people who understand her gift, who can help her reach her full potential. What you're doing isn't protection, it's cruelty." He's close enough now that I can see the pale blue of his eyes, cold as Arctic water, empty of anything resembling human compassion. The syringe moves toward Sophie with surgical precision, and time slows to the consistency of honey, each second stretching like taffy. I bring the .38 down hard across his jaw. The impact travels up my arm like an electric shock, bone against metal, the satisfying crunch of carefully maintained dental work, encountering sudden physics. "Doctor." Glaze staggers, the syringe flying from his hand to shatter against the far wall, its contents spreading across the floor like spilled tears. Blood streams from his mouth, and when he looks at me, his professional composure has cracked to reveal something ugly underneath. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. The work we do saves lives, prevents disasters, protects national security. By turning children into weapons?" I keep the gun trained on him, my finger tight on the trigger. "By erasing their souls and using what's left to play God with tomorrow?" Collins has subdued her opponent, zip-tying his hands with the efficient brutality of someone who's done this too many times to count. The coffee-burned operative sits against the wall, his face red and blistered, but his eyes still track Sophie with predatory interest. It's then that Sophie appears beside me, moving with the silent grace of a child who's learned to make herself invisible when adults start hurting each other. She presses a folded paper into my hand, her fingers cold against my palm. "I drew this while they were breaking down the door," she whispers. "It's different from the others." I unfold the paper with hands that shake despite my best efforts, and what I see there makes my chest tight with something I'd forgotten how to feel. Hope, maybe. Or just the desperate wish that happy endings might actually exist. The drawing shows 4 figures in a car, moving through rain-slicked streets toward dawn light that breaks like a promise across the horizon. The faces are clear this time, detailed in a way that Sophie's drawings rarely achieve. Collins at the wheel, her badge gleaming on her jacket. Julia in the passenger seat, her hand reaching back toward the rear of the vehicle. And in the back seat, a man and a small girl, both looking forward instead of backward, both alive and whole and safe. "You drew us escaping," I say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I drew what could happen if we're brave enough," Sophie corrects. "The pictures aren't always true. Sometimes they're just possible." "Doctor." Glaze struggles to his feet, blood still flowing from his broken mouth, his pale eyes fixed on Sophie with the hunger of a collector who's found something rare and irreplaceable. "You don't understand what she is, what she's capable of. Without proper guidance, her abilities will consume her. Drive her insane. We've seen it before." "Yeah?" I keep the gun steady, my voice cold as winter rain. "What you've seen is what happens when you turn children into laboratory rats. Sophie's not insane. She's just a little girl who sees too much and still manages to draw pictures of hope." Collins appears beside us, her service weapon trained on the 2 operatives who are in no condition to cause further trouble. Rain streams through the broken window, turning the scattered papers into sodden reminders of a life that feels like it belonged to someone else. "We need to move," she says. "More units are en route. I can buy us maybe 10 minutes before this place is surrounded." I look at the drawing in my hand, at Sophie's careful rendering of our escape, at the possibility of tomorrow rendered in crayon and childhood faith. For the first time in 5 years, I allow myself to believe that the future might be something other than punishment for past failures. The uncomfortable heat in my chest transforms into something I barely recognize, determination mixed with hope, purpose wrapped in protective rage. Sophie has drawn our escape, but drawings only become reality when someone has the courage to make them true. Time to find out if we're brave enough. The car slides through empty streets like a bullet through water. Collins's hands steady on the wheel, despite the rain that turns every intersection into a skating rink. The FBI sedan handles better than my ancient Crown Vic, but we're still hydroplaning through turns that would make a stunt driver nervous, the city blurring past in streaks of neon and shadow. I keep one arm around Sophie, feeling her small body pressed against mine in the back seat, her storm cloud eyes wide as she watches the familiar landmarks of her childhood disappear behind us. Julia sits rigid in the passenger seat, her hands gripping the door handle so tight her knuckles have gone white as bone, but she hasn't said a word about Collins's driving. When you're running from people who turn children into psychic weapons, speed limits become academic concepts. The radio crackles with police chatter, voices cutting through static to report suspicious activity at various locations around the city. Collins reaches over to turn down the volume, but not before we hear something that makes my blood freeze. Multiple units responding to Maple Street. Reports of federal agents requesting assistance with fugitive apprehension. They're searching Julia's house, Collins says, taking a turn that puts us onto the interstate, looking for any evidence we might have left behind. Did we leave anything? Julia asks, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Just my old life, I say, thinking about the office I'll never see again, the case files that represent 15 years of trying to atone for one terrible failure. Nothing that matters anymore. Sophie shifts against me, her small hand finding mine in the darkness. When she speaks, her voice is barely above a whisper, but it carries the weight of absolute terror. Don't let them take me back. Her fingers tighten around mine, and I can feel her trembling. Please, they make the children draw bad things. Make them draw people dying so they can make it happen. And when the children get too old or too scared or start drawing things they don't want to see. She doesn't finish the sentence, but she doesn't need to. I've read enough case files to know what happens to assets that outlive their usefulness. The comfortable heat in my chest flares into something harder, something that feels like a promise wrapped in fury. Nobody's taking you anywhere, I tell her, and mean it with every fiber of my being. We're going to find somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach you. Julia turns in her seat, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Ray, it's not just Sophie. There are others, more children like her. The foster care records I've been going through, the cases that Agent Collins showed me, there are dozens of them. Dozens of children who've been taken from families, from homes, turned into whatever Dr. Glaze and his people want them to be. The highway stretches ahead of us, empty except for the occasional truck or late-night commuter. Rain pounds the windshield with increasing fury, and Collins has to slow down to maintain control. But even at reduced speed, we're putting distance between ourselves and the people who want to turn a 7-year-old girl into a fortune-telling machine. We can't save them all, Collins says quietly. Not immediately. But if we can get Sophie to safety, if we can get her testimony on record, we might be able to build a case strong enough to shut down the whole program. How long would that take? Julia asks. Months, maybe years. These people have resources, political connections, the kind of influence that can make inconvenient investigations disappear. Collins glances at me in the rearview mirror. Ray knows what that's like. He's been fighting systems like this his whole career. I think about the corruption cases that got buried, the witnesses who suddenly developed amnesia, the evidence that vanished from locked rooms. The system protects itself, always has, always will. But sometimes, if you're smart enough and stubborn enough and willing to sacrifice everything that matters, you can crack it open just long enough to let some light in. There's a safe house, Collins continues, taking an exit that leads toward the industrial district. Off the books, something I set up for situations like this. It'll buy us time to figure out our next move. The safe house turns out to be a nondescript apartment above a laundromat, the kind of place where people go to disappear into anonymity. Collins leads us up a narrow staircase that smells of detergent and broken dreams, her badge getting us past locks that would keep out casual visitors. The apartment itself is spartanly furnished, government-issue furniture and the kind of beige walls that suggest temporary residence for people whose lives have taken unfortunate turns. But it's clean, it's warm, and most importantly, it's not a white room with no windows where children draw tomorrow's tragedies under clinical supervision. Sophie immediately claims a corner near the window, settling cross-legged on the floor with her sketch pad. But instead of the fearful mechanical drawing I've grown accustomed to, she approaches the paper with something that looks almost like excitement. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Julia asks, settling beside her daughter with the careful movements of someone who's afraid that sudden motions might shatter the fragile peace we've found. "Something new," Sophie says, her crayon moving across the paper with confident strokes. "Something I want to happen instead of something I see happening." I watch her draw, mesmerized by the transformation in her demeanor. The fear is still there, lurking behind her storm cloud eyes, but it's been joined by something else. Determination, maybe, or hope. The crayon moves in swift, sure strokes, creating shapes that gradually resolve into recognizable figures. Children holding hands in a circle, their faces turned toward a rising sun. Dozens of them, all different ages and ethnicities, but unified by something that transcends their differences. At their feet, scattered and broken, are blue silk flowers, crushed underfoot by small sneakers and abandoned dreams. In the background, barely visible but unmistakably present, are the dark figures that represent their former captors, walking away with slumped shoulders and defeated postures. Above it all, the sun rises over an unfamiliar city, its light washing across buildings that look nothing like the places we've just fled. It's a picture of liberation, of children reclaiming their stolen futures, of hope triumphing over the machinery of exploitation. "Where is this?" I ask, pointing to the cityscape in the background. "I don't know yet," Sophie says, adding final details to the circle of children. "But it's where we need to go. All of us. All the children who see too much and all the people who want to protect them." She sets down her crayon and looks up at me with those eyes that have seen too much darkness and are finally beginning to remember what light looks like. "I drew this so it can happen," she says with the quiet confidence of someone who's learned that the future doesn't have to be a prison sentence. Sometimes the pictures want to be happy. We just have to be brave enough to make them real. Morning light filters through the safe house windows like a benediction, pale and clean after the storm that swept through the city overnight. The television murmurs in the corner, its volume low, but its message clear enough to make my coffee taste like victory instead of disappointment. The news anchor has the carefully neutral expression that reporters wear when delivering stories that will end careers and topple governments. Federal agents raided the headquarters of Cerberus Dynamics early this morning, acting on intelligence suggesting the defense contractor was conducting unauthorized medical experiments on children in foster care. Dr. Martin Glaze, a prominent child psychologist, was arrested at his home and charged with multiple violations of federal law regarding human experimentation. Julia sits on the edge of the couch, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that's gone cold while she stared at the screen. Sophie lies curled beside her, finally sleeping the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who no longer has to draw tomorrow's tragedies. Her sketchpad rests open beside her, showing the picture of children holding hands under a rising sun. They're calling it the largest investigation into child exploitation in federal history, the anchor continues, and I catch the subtle emphasis on federal, the kind of careful language that suggests this story goes higher than anyone wants to admit. Sources close to the investigation indicate that dozens of children may have been affected by what prosecutors are calling a systematic program of psychological manipulation and pharmaceutical experimentation. Collins appears from the kitchen, her FBI credentials replaced by civilian clothes that make her look younger, more vulnerable. She's been on the phone most of the night, calling in favors, pulling strings, building the legal framework that will protect Julia and Sophie from the machinery of retribution that's already grinding into motion. "It's not enough," she says quietly, settling into the chair across from us. Glaze is just middle management. The people who run Cerberus, the political figures who authorized the program, They'll find ways to insulate themselves, blame everything on a rogue scientist who exceeded his authority. But it's a start, Julia says, her voice carrying a strength I haven't heard before. Other families will come forward now, other children who've been taken, parents who've been silenced. Sometimes you just need one person to break the silence. I think about the courage it took for her to agree to go on record, to tell her story to federal prosecutors who might or might not believe that a 7-year-old girl can draw pictures of tomorrow. Julia Wells, the woman who blamed me for Ellen's death, risking everything to protect a child who isn't even biologically hers. The witness protection arrangements are in place, Collins continues, pulling out a manila envelope thick with documents. New identities, relocated housing, educational support for Sophie. You'll be safe, but you'll also be starting completely over. Julia nods, her hand moving to stroke Sophie's hair with the gentle precision of someone who's learned that love is measured in small gestures rather than grand declarations. What about Ray? Ray's not going into witness protection, Collins says, looking at me with the kind of expression that suggests difficult conversations in the near future. His testimony is too valuable and his profile is too high. But we can offer him protection, surveillance, the kind of support that keeps people breathing when other people want them to stop. I think about the office above the Chinese restaurant, about 15 years of trying to atone for one terrible failure by solving other people's smaller failures. That life feels like it belonged to someone else, someone who still believed that justice was something you found rather than something you fought for with broken furniture and a .38 revolver. When do they leave? I ask. This afternoon. The longer we wait, the more time Cerberus has to mobilize their resources. Collins hands me the envelope. Bus tickets to a city I can't name, documents that will make Julia and Sophie disappear into the kind of anonymity that keeps children safe from people who view them as assets. Sophie stirs, her storm cloud eyes opening to find mine. She doesn't look surprised to see the envelope in my hands, doesn't ask what it means or where she's going. Instead, she reaches for her sketch pad and tears out a fresh page. I need to draw something for you, she says, her voice still thick with sleep. Or something important. Her crayon moves across the paper with the confident strokes of someone who's finally learned to control her gift instead of being controlled by it. But this drawing is different from the others. Not a vision of what might happen or what should happen, but something simpler and more profound. It shows a man sitting at a desk in a room filled with sunlight. The man looks older, more weathered than the figure in her earlier drawings, but his eyes hold something they haven't held before. Peace, maybe, or acceptance. The desk is clean, organized, with files that suggest current cases rather than old failures. Through the window behind him, the city sprawls under clear skies, and there are no storm clouds on the horizon. At the bottom of the page, in her careful block letters, she writes, "You can change tomorrow." Is this what you see? I ask, my voice rougher than I intend. It's what I want to see, Sophie says, handing me the drawing with the solemnity of someone bestowing a benediction. Sometimes that's enough to make it real. The bus station is exactly what you'd expect. Fluorescent lights that make everyone look sick, plastic chairs that weren't designed for human comfort, and the kind of pervasive sadness that comes from watching people leave everything they know behind. Julia and Sophie sit beside me on a bench that's probably older than I am, their new identification documents tucked safely in a bag that will travel with them to whatever city Collins has chosen for their new life. Sophie has changed clothes, traded her ink-stained shirt for something clean and anonymous that makes her look like any other child traveling with her mother. But her eyes still hold that storm cloud depth, the knowledge of things that children shouldn't have to understand. "Will we see you again?" Julia asks, her voice carefully neutral. "Maybe," I lie, because sometimes kindness requires dishonesty. "When this is all over, when it's safe, maybe." Sophie looks up at me with those eyes that see too much, and I know she understands the truth even if Julia needs the comfort of uncertainty. When she speaks, her voice carries the weight of absolute certainty. You're going to be okay. I drew you being okay. The bus arrives with a hiss of air brakes and diesel exhaust, its destination sign showing a city I've never visited, but know will be far enough from here to matter. Julia stands first, shouldering the bag that contains their new life, then helps Sophie to her feet with the careful attention that mothers reserve for precious cargo. Sophie turns back to me one last time, her small hand finding mine. Her fingers are warm now, no longer stained with ink and charcoal, no longer trembling with the weight of tomorrow's tragedies. Thank you for changing the pictures, she says. As the bus pulls away, I stand in the diesel-scented twilight and watch until the taillights disappear into traffic. The drawing she gave me rests in my jacket pocket, next to my heart, where it feels like carrying around a piece of hope. For the first time in 5 years, I believe it might actually be possible to change tomorrow. And for the first time since Katie died, that uncomfortable heat in my chest feels less like guilt and more like the possibility of redemption. The future is coming whether I like it or not, but maybe, just maybe, it doesn't have to look like the past.